What you doing? I'm making a tabletop easel from this single plank of pine wood today. If I had an endless supply of wood, planning for this project would be so much easier. However, I only plan to use this one imperfect pine wood plank. This plank was sold as a piece of scrap and has these drill holes at the top, center, and bottom. We'll just have to work with the cards without. I don't know how this will turn out, and we shall see. I didn't make a 3D CAD model this time, so please forgive the ugly drawing. This simple custom easel design calls for 7 key pieces of wood. I'm thinking of adding accessory pieces later on from the available scraps, but we'll get to that later. I'm choosing to make it a trapezium instead of a triangle, so the top can provide more support for the canvas. I'm designing this easel to hold canvases of up to 18 inches tall and 1.5 inches thick. I'm choosing to make the base 2 inches wide, so it can hold canvases that are 1.5 inches thick. Imagine this drawing is the plank. At first, I wanted to cut this plank into 2 usable pieces, and then rip them into 6 like so. But then I'll only end up with 6 decently sized pieces that aren't too thin. So I came up with this genius idea to conjure up a 7th piece from the center by carefully carving away only the drill holes at the center and leaving the rest intact. Great! All 7 pieces are now accounted for. Let's get to marking and sewing. In over a month of woodworking, I discovered that precision in woodworking is challenging yet important. This marking gauge I made is a great case in point. It is made very imprecise and is now tedious to work with. Eventually, I went back to my trusty pencil and measuring tape for marking. Little did I know that after lots of time and effort, I had messed up the measurements by misreading where the half-inch mark is on the measuring tape. I began to realize my mistake here. No! Since I need to start over, I thought I might as well try to make marking easier for myself by making a makeshift long ruler. And I thought Legos might just do the trick. Let's start all over again. Mistakes happen. I'm pretending all that never happened, and I'll start over on the other face of the plank. The Legos ruler does have some wiggle and give, but it's giving better results than my shoddy marking gauge, so I can't complain. We're ready to start sewing. I managed to saw off one of the unusable end piece there. I then tried to secure the piece vertically in the workbench for ripping. But look at how much the plank moves. While this portable workbench is good for many things, there's no way I can rip the plank lengthwise like that. I'm gonna have to find an alternative. This is what I came up with. I put together 2 small benches as an ad hoc saw bench. It worked quite splendidly. I found that the workbench was still better for when I need to saw across the plank. I flipped the plank around to saw off the other pesky, unusable end piece. Then comes the most challenging part of the sawing. We need to execute precise cuts here. That's one little cut. Flip the board around. Another little cut. And finally, we carefully rip what's left of the plank into the different pieces. Our rough cut pieces are ready for planing. This scrap plank came with stain and varnish. I've left the varnish on for a few of my past projects, like the tiny bookshelf and a small stool, but I think I'll plane them away for the easel so that the easel can have a fresh and consistent look. I didn't show too much of the planning as it looks repetitive, but it took many hours. Many hours of doing just this. I filled my whole rubbish bin with wood shavings, and I compacted them. At this point, I was so tuckered out that I just had to sit down. But the show must go on, so I improvised by folding the workbench down and sitting on it, and continued planing. I thought that this easel project is a good intermediate project for practicing precision. It has a manageable number of key pieces, and even if it's a little imprecise, the pieces will still fit together decently well because we'll be using nails instead of any crazy joints. I stood back up as I needed the workbench vise to elevate a few short pieces. Originally, I wrote the labels for each piece on the wood directly with pencil, but now I'm playing off all the surfaces. I transferred the labels onto washi tape. This was my second last piece to plane, and I was so eager to complete this task. And then the piece snapped. Well, what can you do? I finished planing the two broken halves, saw that it was still salvageable, thankfully, and tried to fix it with glue. I didn't have a clamp long enough to clamp the two ends of the pieces, so I clamped the glued piece down onto the table, hoping that would suffice. Assuming I did 50 strokes per face and 10 strokes per edge, that's 1,680 push reps. Who needs the gym when you've got woodworking? Anyway, I left this overnight and crossed my fingers and wished for this fix to work. Okie dokie. It is now second day. Excited to start assembling everything. Oh, first we gotta get that one last piece that has been gluing overnight. Oh, well, unexpected challenge. This is glued very firmly onto the table. Nope. Okay, I'm gonna find a way to free this. Let's see. Okay. Oh, great. Came off. And appears to be glued together. Very good. Now we're talking. Alright, let's get into the assembly. Number 7 is at the back. Number 1 is here. It took me a while to figure out where everything should be, but eventually I felt like I was confident enough to start gluing the pieces together. But before the gluing commences, I did some last markings to ensure I got the center points and some semblance of symmetry. Very shortly, I will be glad that I marked the pieces clearly and had a drawing to reference. Hinge. That move was a mistake, but I didn't know at this point. On hindsight, it's really funny how serious I was, trying to make sure this mistake turns out right. But that's life, isn't it? We do our best with what we know now and trust ourselves that we will find the right way. And I did here. Wait a second, I just realized that what I was trying to glue here just now is not supposed to be there. This is the leg. This 2-inch piece is supposed to be the base. So let me just quickly rectify that. I was trying to decide which face of the piece should be facing outside, but both sides are pretty ugly and gnarly. There we go. Oh, bad now. Okay, all good. Now we will just wait for the glue to dry. After the glue dries, we will be adding nails. And I'm choosing to add nails this time instead of dowels just because I want to try putting nails into woodwork. I haven't done that before. And I know that pine wood has a tendency of splitting, so I got these 2 pieces of scrap. This piece on top that is bare, I've planed it, is from the exact same piece of pine as the rest of the wood in the easel. This one is a different plank, but they should be of the same material. So I'm going to be doing some pilot holes, drill through the wood at an angle so that it will hold the wood piece together better, and knock in the nail as I would for the easel. And we'll see if it goes well and if we need to do any adjustment before we drill the holes into the actual easel. I'm using a 1.5 mm drill bit here, giving it a try without knowing what to expect. That's not bad at all. It wiggles, but that's because there's only one nail that acts as the pivot point. I'm sure if we add in a second nail, it will be super solid. This is holding the wood together really well, and I have to do a lot to force it apart. Pretty decent. It is now time to assemble with nails. If you think that the drill bit angle is odd, you'll be right. That is clearly foreshadowing for what is to come, but I was blissfully unaware as of this moment. I'm blunting the nails first because I read online that this prevents the wood from splitting. I think this is the moment that angle of hammering went wrong. It was pretty much downhill from there. Nothing I did made the nails straighten out. It's not supposed to look like that. Oh bother. I made a weak attempt to remove the nails, but they were solidly embedded. Well, that went terribly. Let's continue. Oh my god. I just broke a drill bit. That is the drill bit sticking out. I decided to ransack my dad's toolbox in a valiant attempt to retrieve the broken bit. I found a pair of rusty pliers and gave it a try. Attempt 1. Attempt 2. Attempt 3. The third time was in fact not the charm, and I promptly decided to give up and decided to pretend that the drill bit is a nail. Thankfully, I have a spare drill bit of similar size. The show must go on. We're almost there, but we've got one last very important step of adding on the last leg. This is the closest thing I can find to a hinge. You can imagine that this is meant for a door, and the lock goes here. As I fumble about trying to figure out how to install this hardware, I caught the fact that I was looking at the wrong side of the easel. Good catch! I found a drill bit whose size is comparable to the diameter of the screw. Notice how I didn't do a test round on the scrap piece. And notice how the screw immediately falls into the drilled hole.
Actually a bit too big a hole.
I could not find any screws that were wider than the original and yet short enough to not go through the wood. So, this is what I suggest. We pretend that this never happened and flip the wood around and try again on the other side. Woohoo! I'm using a 2mm drill bit instead of a 3mm drill bit this time. And this time, the drill hole is tight for the screws, so I promptly added a dribble of glue and screwed it in. Since there are already holes at the bottom of the legs from the mistake just now, I decided to use it by screwing in this hook I found in my dad's toolbox. The makeshift hinge appears to be working well, and I came up with a rudimentary but functional mechanism to keep the easel angle fixed, with just a random shoelace I found lying around. I'm also thinking of adding additional pieces over here to prevent the canvas from sliding out. Remember I said at the start that we'll get to the accessory later? Well, we're doing that now. This is a good piece of scrap which I saved and later planed. I'm going to cut 2 guardrails as the accessory. I don't know if these accessories make the easel better or worse. Someone who paints, please let me know in the comments. And finally, it is time for the finish. 感恩。